Check the mic and make sure it sound right.
All right, I'm here today with Coach Lee Underwood, head men's and women's tennis coach at Barton College. How are you doing today, Lee?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Alec.
How have you been over the last couple months? I know it's been some strange times for us as coaches.
Just busy recruiting, working around the house, just same old normal stuff except no practicing.
Yeah, it's definitely different with no tennis. My introduction of Coach Lee is that he was the former Edinburgh men's and women's tennis coach when I was a player at Fairmont, and I know he's got a pretty vast history across what is now the current Atlantic region. Lee, you want to give us kind of just a little introduction to your background of how you got into the game of college tennis and where it all started for you?
Well, I really got started by, junior year. I played baseball for 2 years at Davis and Elkins, and then I got out of that, went back into tennis, played my last 2 years there. Team wasn't very good, to be honest with you. I was still progressing, getting better as far as that goes. So it was a good opportunity for me at that point in time. A really good team. I might not have made the team at that point in time. So D&E was a good opportunity for me to get with that. So I played the last 2 years there. Played 2 and 3 singles. I think the majority of my time there, my last year, and I think I played 2 doubles, if I remember right.
So what years would that have been, and kind of how long did it take from you graduating to you taking over as the coach at Davis?
Well, basically, I took over almost immediately after graduating. I guess you could say the story goes, I was playing tennis, working maintenance at the college, which is what I used to do during the summer. I was going to stick around in town, and basically I was going to get on the sub list, try and get a teaching job. I've got a master's. Well, at that time I had a bachelor's in physical education and health, and had done my student teaching. Was going to look about getting into that. And the athletic director at the time, Will Shaw, came across what I called the big lawn there. So he asked me, "Hey, what are you doing this fall?" And I said, "Well, I'm probably going to get on the sub list." And he said, "I got something probably more for you." So that's kind of how it started. Wasn't much pay back in those days, Alec. I'll tell you this, because a lot of people out there are always talking about how little they got paid, but I was paid $500 per team. So I coached men's and women's tennis, so I made $1,000 a year. And the funny thing is I had a girl I think it was my second team there, Melody Ware. She's a local girl to Elkins, and nice player. She came to play for me, and anyway, it got her a work study job. She basically did work study for me, and her work study job, she could make up to $1,500. So technically, my work study got paid more than I did.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like some of the funniest stories are when coaches talk about how little they were paid early on or things like that. What year would that have been when you took over at D&E?
About 91.
91?
Yeah.
So you took over in 91. I know you said the shape of the program the level wasn't super high whenever you were a player there. Is that kind of the level that you took over as the coach as well?
Yeah. Basically, actually, probably worse. It was probably worse after I started than it was when I left. There were several seniors on the team from the year before that were, fairly solid type of players for most of the WIC teams. So it wasn't too bad, but we were pretty bad. I think my first men's team went 2-9 maybe, and my first women's team might have went 3-8. In those days, Alec, the women were under our WIC rules. You could only play in the spring if you won your conference championship. Then you were allowed 10 extra dates. Otherwise, the women only played in the fall, and likewise for the men in the spring.
So obviously, the level of the program wasn't the highest when you took it over. What were kind of some of the initial steps as head coach that you kind of felt like needed to be done in order to increase the level of the team? And what were some of the early challenges that you faced?
Well, the initial thing was recruiting. That was, that's every coach will say that from here on out. A lot of recruiting had to be done. I was lucky enough with the women's team to get some solid West Virginia girls. In fact, most of my team was from West Virginia early on. On the men's side, I had some guys that played another sport that were good athletes and turned a cross country player and a pretty daggone good tennis player for league. But but we were recruiting in. D&E actually started giving me a little bit of scholarship money. My first big recruit was Steve France from up in Ontario, Canada. He was my first big recruit, and it brought him in. We had a Japanese boy that ended up playing that year, and it brought a kid in from Maryland, and another kid from West Virginia. We really turned things around. That was the 93, 94 year. We turned things around there. The women's team, like I said, the women were probably ahead of the men early on. They were pretty competitive, not only in our conference, but even with PSAC teams. We were pretty competitive as far as that goes. So that's how it started out. But I had a string of Canadians early on with the men's team, stretched all the way up to me leaving D&E. Actually went even into Wesley, and they were all taught by one another. So I went through a string of those from Steve France to David O'Neill to Matt Cusdub. Well, David taught Matt. Matt taught Rob Hilton, and who I had at Wesley. And so I went through a string of that. But we started trying to expand our recruiting as far as that goes. We were a top 4 team pretty much the entire time through the 90s with the men, or at least from 94 on. The women's team were a top 4 team in the league. So we were pretty competitive with everybody. Women might have been a little bit more competitive within the top 4. Outside of West Liberty most years. West Liberty kind of dominated the women's team through the 90s. And Jim Crutchfield was basketball coach at Nova Southeastern in Florida now. But he had some good women's teams there. On the men's side, University of Charleston, he had a number of foreign players. He also had a really good West Virginia kid from over in the Eastern Panhandle named John Dawson played there that played 4 years, was conference player of the year his last 2 years. But he had guys like Mauricio Hinojosa. I think he was a Colombian, if I remember right. Yanni Seek, which was, I think he was Swedish, if I remember right. Sean Fowler from Australia. They had a bunch. Right when I was playing, you had guys like Sean Murphy, who ended up, well, he coached at UC for a while, but he was a pro down at the director of tennis at the Y for a long time. After that, but there's a lot of good players. Wesleyan was at the time. Wesleyan was pretty far behind Charleston in the men, but they had some pretty good teams. Bill Robeson was an English kid that played for them. They had another English kid that transferred to WU. I can't remember his name offhand, but that was probably most of Charleston the whole 90s in men's tennis, early 90s in women's tennis. Then it was West Liberty. Pretty much till Jim got out of coaching women's tennis. Through that, I forget what year he left, but and then going forward, you're probably looking at Stan Ball came in the late 90s. Sherry Reed started coaching late 90s, I think maybe around 97 or 98, maybe or 99. big players then. I mean, I had a stud at the time named Tomas Veskame and another really good player named David Brown. Tomas was from Estonia and David was from Canada, but they were doubles champions for a couple years. Tomas was the player of the year his senior year. You had that South African from Charleston, Kenneth Biggs, who's pretty good player. With that. After that, we basically hit this century, and Shepherd kind of came on. They won most of the time. Throw in a West Liberty win one time, and I think men's tennis. I think they won in 03, and maybe it was Charleston in 03. Wesley was always in there too. Wesleyan won twice under Jarrett Lutheran there in the early 2000s. But Stanball's team up to about Salem won. I think it was I want to say 05 or 06.
I think it was 05-06 season. Yeah.
He had several forward kids, some pretty good players in there. I had a bunch of Kenyans there at the turn of the century. Barry Ndenya, he won Player of the Year in the league. Was undefeated for 2 years, and then got upset in his last year that he was there in the conference tournament. But he was definitely a good player. He was ranked we were in the Great Lakes Valley region at the time. He was ranked in the Great Lakes Valley region in singles. As far as national competition throughout all that, Larry Cochran's teams at Charleston, they had they were top 20 a couple times and in the top 25 most of his time there, which he was there from maybe 89, 90 to about 96, 97. As far as that goes, then Sean Fowler took over for him, and then followed by Sherry Reed. But the level of play, other than those Charleston teams, were not very good regionally, Alec, is what I would say. Barry and Tomas were as good as any other one from any other place in the region. I mean, we beat teams. They beat players like from USC Aiken and in places like that that were good, solid players. In Barton at the time, which was a top 25 team, beat their one. But primarily speaking, there wasn't much competitiveness with other teams regionally or nationally outside of those Charleston teams in the 90s. Women's tennis, a little different. Jim's team was pretty strong regionally. Crutchfield's team with women's tennis, they were pretty strong regionally. Made the NCAA tournament one year, or made the nationals one year, I should say. They regularly won our league, so they were automatic qualifiers. But that brings us up to early 2000s as far as there. I left D&E in 2004, so my last year, everybody says, I've got. It's somewhere over 600 victories as a coach, but I've had some great teams. I've had teams as many as 23 matches, but my worst team I ever had from a team perspective was my last year at D&E. My women's team didn't win a match, and my men's team didn't win a match. We were 0 for the year. So I've seen things from all different angles and have had a lot of success, but I've had a couple teams that were really bad. Scholarshiping levels were bad there. D&E probably only had about 300 kids on campus total at the time. Enrollment was way down. Not like D&E that we see today. But anyway, I didn't want to get ahead of myself, but that's pretty much perspective of at least the 90s and early 2000s from my D&E days, and the other teams, the other coaches that were pretty significant for the league.
So you touched on a little bit about the next question I had was kind of when did the international presence really get big in the WIVIAC conference. I know you said throughout the 90s, it seems like Charleston had a lot of international players.
Early in the 90s they did, but later in the 90s they didn't have much, or they might have one. Like Kenneth Biggs was from South Africa later on, but they, when they had Hinojosa and all of those, Sean Murphy, his brother Brendan, that was pretty much it all. Fairly much, or at least 2/3 of the lineup was all international. The league didn't go. I mean, you'd have to skip up to about. I can tell you this. I think it was 2006 or 7. Maybe it was 2007, or it could have been 2005. One of those years. Every single conference, all conference selection in men's tennis was all West Virginians. Okay. Michael Bumgarner was one of them from Charleston area. It might have been around 05 because before Salem brought in a few international kids in that 05-06 year. But it's kind of strange. 05, you had every single kid that was in the WIC all conference team was from West Virginia. And honestly, from a regional perspective, we were pretty bad. With other teams in our region. We were in the Great Lakes region. I was probably the only guy, maybe Wesley at the time, that would play outside of that, try and hit it like in Indianapolis and things like that. Once we went to the Great Lakes region, we were in the Great Lakes region from, I think, 2000 up until 2009. So we were there about 9 years, but there was very little play because there was a long distance between schools in the Great Lakes region and with the GLIAC and the GLVC compared to where we were at. And probably overall, I would tell you, Alec, that those teams were overall up till 08. Up until 08 were not very good. My 08 team was the first team in the NCAA era to actually win a round at the NCAA tournament. We beat Ferris State 5-2 to advance to region finals against Northwood. Northwood was top 15 in the country. They beat us. The score ended up being 5-0, and this is in 08, by the way. And we would have won one and two singles against them, and we almost won a doubles match. But they were a better team than we were. But that was our first mark at a regional level where we were on par with the other teams. We were ranked third in the region at that time. Before, only the team that won would get in, and they would always be number 7 or 8. It used to take about 8 teams at that time. So, but the 08 team is probably when the WIC went to all international from the Wesleyan perspective. We had Dennis Cole from Huntington in there, and we had Adam White, but everybody else was pretty much international, and that would be the same in 09 and 2010, my last year at Wesleyan.
Doug Hornack was on one of those teams, right? 09 or 10?
Doug Hornack was there in 09 and 2010. Doug actually teamed up with Alvaro Ochoa at the ITA Regionals. And this was the first time any team had made any kind of dent in the NCAA portion of the ITAs. Doug and Alvaro was in the finals of the doubles. In
ITA A-Draw?
Yeah, yes, A-Draw. And we lost to a team from Kutztown, and Alvaro Ochoa was the first player to make it to the finals and in singles in the A-Draw. And he lost in the finals to a kid from Kutztown and everything. That would have been the fall of 2008, but the 2008-2009 school year.
I work with Doug now, so I knew that he was a part of one of those teams. He still occasionally breaks out an old Wesleyan shirt at work.
Yeah, he played singles for us. I think he played
6 singles,
5 or
maybe?
6 singles
Yeah.
for us in '09, and in 2010 he didn't play singles, but he was on one of the doubles teams in doubles for us. I think he played 2 doubles if I remember right. I think he might have played with Daniel Lobo at the end of the year. I played with some other people before that, but yeah, 2010 team at the time was the best. That was the best team that the WVIC had produced, outside of maybe one of Larry Cochran's teams had produced, at least from my time on. We were really, really good. Just to give you a perspective, by 2018, which was in the Great Lakes region, we finished, I think, 32 in the country. And we beat Palm Beach Atlantic, was in the top 40, almost knocked off Tusculum, it was in the top 40. And those were unheard of things for WVIC teams at the time. And then in 2009, we were pretty good. Well, I mean, we were just as good or better in 2009, but we'd win in the Atlantic region. And at the time, there was only a coach's poll. Because we went in the Atlantic region, we went down and we were like 42nd, 44th. And I was a little better. I've always been miffed at that. And then in 2010, we were really, really good. Really good. I mean, my whole team would have been an all-conference team if the coaches would, probably vote correctly. And I was so deep. I had 19 players at the time, but my top 12 were all very good. And we, in 2000, in the fall 2009, we had the singles champion, the very first ITA singles champion for a WVI school, and that was Mark Rosner, a German kid on my team. But we were really good, and we were never ranked until we lost to Columbus State in the Nationals, and that was the first men's team to ever make it to the Nationals. In men's tennis in the NCAA portion. I had this argument with someone one time. Said, "Well, we have a team every year make it." And I said, "Yeah, but that's regionals. But nationals is the final 16 teams." And we lost to Columbus State. They beat us 5-0. But believe me, every match was tough. And we probably, if we could have finished, probably would have won 5 or 6 singles against them. And the coach. Evan Isaacs, I still remember this. He said, "Man, you guys are the best number 48 team in the country I've ever seen." But that was the disparity with the coaches poll. And that's where we finished, was 48th in the country, in the Nationals. But we were way better than my 2008 team. I mean, we were 2 or 3 players at the top better. So, and we were very competitive with the top 15 team at the time. So, WIC just didn't really get much respect. Part of it was because the rest of the conference was not in line with the Wesleyan program as far as the depth of talent at the time.
So to take a little bit of a step back here, I know you said that you ended your D&E career on kind of a low for yourself. You said you have your worst teams. Whenever you decided to make that jump from D&E to Wesleyan, what were some of the things that factored into that in you making that initial jump, your first coaching job and leaving it to take your next step?
Well, there's a little story within that, and here's what happened. I was not happy in the direction that probably D&E was going at the time. I mean, we had nobody on campus. I didn't know if we would even be open in a year or two at the time. Had no scholarship money. Well, none that I could control. We had a financial aid system where you fit into a cell, and then whatever that cell was, that's what they got. Now you could designate some part of that cell athletic, but if you didn't give them a dime, they still got the same amount. So it was not a very good financial aid model to recruit good players. And I had actually the time, that was my 13th year. I had actually told the coaches in the spring, I said, "You're not going to see me back. This is it. I can't take it anymore." And yeah, I'm resigning at the end of this. Once I get back, I'm going to resign. And Matt Bowman was the coach at Wesleyan, and he talked. Well, right when I said that, he said, "Hey, I might have something for you." So what happened was we talked, and he said, "Well, how do you feel about maybe being a grad assistant? Still stick around the game." And they had an MBA program, and I thought, well, I mean, yeah, I think I could probably, I stick around. It wasn't very far from Elkins, so it wouldn't be the same as being the head coach anyway. And so anyway, I called George Clemens, who was the athletic director there, say, "Hey, how do you feel like having, I think I was 34, 35 at the time. Say, hey, how do you feel about having a 34, 35-year-old GA?" And he said, "Oh, well, we got one in baseball." He said, no, that'd be fine. But then before I got off the call, he told me that I think I'm going to have something more for you. So he had talked a little bit about compliance. So I didn't know if it was that, because I was also the compliance director at Davis Elkins for the last 5 years I was there. And meanwhile, I should note that from 96 on, I was teaching public school full time too. So, I was still teaching public school full time at the time. I was a compliance coordinator and men's and women's tennis coach, and running the fitness center and the pool, which is a topic for another day, but it was a rough hoe. But anyway, come find out, he wanted me to come up. I thought it was more of an interview process, so I came up, and he explained to me that I guess they were having some problems, and Matt might not return as the head coach. So he called me up there, and on the day I guess he called up there, I guess either Matt decided, whichever way it went, that either he wasn't returning or whatever the story was, but they handed me the keys that day. So I became the men's tennis coach at West Virginia Wesleyan, in the summer of 2004. I didn't actually take over the Diane Godwin, who had played there in the I think the 80s or the 80s. I think she took over for the women. She was also the school nurse, and she took over for the women, and she did that for 2 years. And then I ended up taking over both programs after she decided she didn't want to do that anymore.
So you take over as Wesleyan in an interesting scenario, I guess, because you had anticipated to be the grad assistant. So they hand you the keys to be the head coach at Wesleyan. I know we already talked a little bit about how much success you were able to produce at Wesleyan. What do you think were some of the key differences, why you were able to create such a winning culture there at Wesleyan? What were some of the big factors?
Well, one was the fact that Wesleyan has a niche about getting very good academic students. The guys like Dennis Cole, Doug Hornack, very good academic kids. I mean, even from West Virginia. Adam White, who was, one of the better players I've ever had. He's from Charleston. He was a very good academic kid. So they had really good SAT scores. I'm talking above 11, 1,200, most of them. I think maybe even Dennis Cole might have had over 1,300 SAT. But they had a niche for, being able to get those type of kids. And then we changed our scholarshiping structure after my second year there. It really allowed us to stack. Before that, we weren't allowed to stack, and we were in a cap. So that opened things up, and I was able to recruit a lot of very good international kids who were very good academically. I mean, one of my kids that was on my last team there, Yadia Yim Kim, he had a 1,500 SAT. So we regularly had really good kids. Nicole Andrini, who I didn't initially recruit, transferred out of Grove City to come back. She was from Wheeling, and she was a state champion in singles. And we had a bunch of state champions off of either team. I mean, Nicole Andrini was a single state champion in West Virginia. You had Paige Hathaway, who was a doubles. was part of one of the double state champions. On the men's side, I had Adam White, who was the singles champ. The loser that year, the Adam won, was Doug Hornack. And then the next year, I got Doug Hornack, who was a state champion. So we were, the West. And Dennis Cole was a 3-time state champion in singles. He only lost the senior year. He lost in the finals. So I was able to recruit very good academic kids in West Virginia that were the best players too. And then I complemented it with some very good, international kids, as far as that goes. On my men's team, I think I had 12 international kids out of my 19 on my men's team. On the women's team, we had 14 that last year was there. I think there was 6 or 7 of those were international. And most of the starters outside of, Nicole played singles and Paige played some doubles for us. That was a conference championship team in the fall of 2009 with the Wesleyan women. Was very, very good. And 2008, 2009, or 2008, 09 years through 2010, they all made the NCAA tournament on the women's side. But I guess I probably should be remiss and say, but through the history of the WIC after 2000, it's primarily a little bit of Shepherd. There, I think Shepherd won in 1 year, but Sherry Reed's team was very solid year in, year out, won it most years. And also then when John Sims came along, they were contenders to win it every year. And after I left Wesleyan, it ended up being, I call it the John Sims Sherry Reed battle every year. As far as that goes, I knocked off John 2 years in a row. Those last 2 years I was at Wesleyan, and it ended up being more Wesleyan Charleston battle. But before that, it was just a Canal City battle. Or after that, a Canal City battle for the tournament.
So you're talking about whenever you left Wesleyan. So jumping ahead here a little bit. So you left Wesleyan, which obviously you had, began to get into uncharted territory as far as the WVIAC was concerned, as far as your success. Why did you jump from Wesleyan, where you had, so much success, to start a new program at Edinboro, and kind of how did that take place?
Well, a couple reasons. One is, if you remember me telling you I was a public school teacher. Mm-hmm. And that last year I was at Wesleyan, I missed about 20 days. I had to take non-pay days. So anyway, my principal was understanding, but I'm thinking, man, if I'm going to do this every year, this is not too kosher. And I was doing everything I could to play everything I could on the weekends, but it was tough. We didn't have mandated schedules from the conference, so I could shove what I needed to shove outside of the Fairmonts or playing at Salem or something like that, where I could play during the week, but I would play almost everything else on weekends. And so, before we had all our success in that 2010 year, I knew that they were cutting the program as far as from a scholarship issue. So there was definitely going to take a step backwards. It wouldn't be immediate. In fact, the 2011 team went to nationals too. But after I left, but they were loaded. But the women's team took a big hit because we lost our top 3 after I left. And Wesleyan hasn't had a contender for a Mountain East or a WVIC since I left in 2010. They've been really solid for the league for the men, but the women have never rebounded from that. But also the fact that I wanted to do it full time, and jobs were now starting to be more full time in tennis. So Edinboro, I actually interviewed for 3 jobs after coming back from nationals. So I interviewed for Shenandoah, which was a D3 school over in near Winchester. They had pretty solid pay, but for the area it wasn't that solid. And it was D3, and I didn't know how I would deal with that, but I was offered that job on the spot. Took some time, turned that down. I went down to Mount Olive, was a finalist there, and I actually, at the time I really wanted that job because it was the same type of recruiting. They had a similar financial aid structure. I felt, and they were already pretty solid. They had been in the top 40 teams most years, and so it was the groundwork would have been there. Edinboro was the best paying out of all of them, and probably from benefits and everything else is probably, I'm not sure you could, outside the PSAC, you could find a job quite as good as that for the pay benefit structure. But I ended up taking the job at Edinboro, and went there, and I was starting a program. It was brand new. I went from being the best teams, or my women's team was like number 2 in the region the year before, I think, and my men's team was number 1 in the region. I went from the best teams in the region, being in the same region, to being the worst teams in the region automatically. So we got things started, but Edinboro was a lot different than Wesleyan was.
And when you talk about, now, were you resurrecting a program that they had previously, or had they never had a tennis program in their history?
No, they had a tennis program. I think they dropped it in 03. It might have been either 03 or 04. Andy Finley was a coach who's a staple up in the Erie area, well, all of Pennsylvania and that region. I mean, really good guy. He had coached the teams. Edinboro has a really rich history in tennis. But dated back to really the 80s. Outside of, well, they had some good players in the 90s, but early 90s, but the 80s and the 70s they were really good. Won some conference championships, and they were NAIA at the time, the 70s and 80s. Mercyhurst was really good. Mercyhurst won a national title. I'm going to say it was 79 or 81. I looked it up here recently, but I forget. But those teams were really good. That region as a whole. Bloomsburg was in the NCAA, and they were top 10 in the country for a few years. So I mean, the tennis was, the PSAC had a reputation of having very good teams. And right before I got into the PSAC, Kutztown was in the top 20, 30 teams in the country. So I mean, and Bloomsburg was ranked in the top 50. I mean, you had some good teams. The PSAC was the better league overall.
So going, to Edinboro, where you said you're, pretty much the worst in the conference taking over, you just started a new program. What were some things early on that you were able to do to kind of take those next steps up? I know your first year or two were a struggle, but I think by year maybe 3 or 4, you were already atop the conference, correct?
Well, the third year we actually, it was kind of funny. A guy named Andrew Massara, I called him Moose. And, it was so strange at Edinboro to start out with because it was just an email team. I mean, I'm getting with the missions. It's August. Now it'll be July. I came back from a camp. I'm getting with the missions. We're sending out letters saying, hey, we're going to have a tryout. Got to get this done to do it. So this kid named Andrew Massara, who his nickname was Moose, who was just a great overall guy. He and I stayed close contacts to this day, but he was at the first meeting. He could verify this, but I didn't know what to say. I'm looking at a room. There was a ton of people in the room. I mean, a ton. I mean, I think we had 35 people in the room, all coming out for a men's and women's tennis team. And I said something stupid, or I thought it was stupid at the time, but I thought, well, I got to say something. So I just told them all we were going to win a conference title within 4 years and stuff. And thank you guys for coming out, because you guys are going to be the ones who are going to take that step forward so that we can do that. And anyway, it ended up being true, but I wouldn't have bought it myself. I didn't buy it myself at the time. I can tell you that much. But we weren't bad in my second year. The men's team almost was 500, and we had more. The girls' team wasn't bad either, but we had some girls leave after the fall, so we weren't real strong in the spring. And the Western Division in the PSAC is one of the toughest divisions. And we had Cal PA was top 10 in the country, Slippery Rock, Mercyhurst, IUP had come on. So I mean, there's 4 teams, only 3 of them you make the conference tournament. So we normally had a team that we normally had more NCAA qualified teams that made the NCAA tournament out of the Western Division than we actually had teams that made the conference tournament. So it was a very competitive division in women's tennis there. But women came along a little more slowly, but we broke through, lost to Kutztown, and that was 2013. And because of we were in the top 7 teams to make the NCAA tournament, but there was down the CIAA, there was a team that won the conference tournament, got the automatic bid, knocked us out because they had to go in, and so we didn't make the NCAA tournament that year. And the next year, we won the NCAA tournament, or excuse me, the PSAC tournament, but we went in as number 2 seed, ended up beating Kutztown. And we were okay that year, Alec, but we weren't real good. But we ended up going pretty far. That team made nationals. We ended up defeating Charleston, who had beaten us during the regular season in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And then we played Kutztown and beat Wesleyan, and we just beat them the week before. And that was a strange match. That was actually the greatest tennis match I was ever involved in. I don't know if you want me to elaborate on it, but
Please.
Well, we were the week before, we won 2 out of 3 doubles against Kutztown and should have won the third. We blew a 6-1 lead at 1 doubles back when we used to play 8-game pro sets, and came out, but was up after doubles 2-1. At the NCAA regional finals, we're down 3-0, and I don't think we didn't win enough games to even equal a pro set.
You dropped all 3 doubles?
Yes. Yeah, it was terrible. I was yelling and jumping on kids we were standing around. I'm like, golly, guys, fight here. And, anyway, I don't know if I've given any good speeches, but that was probably the first time that I gave one, and actually, I don't know if it made any difference, but we won. I'll put it to you that way. But we just went in the huddle. I called my wife and said, well, it's probably going to be about 20 minutes. I'm going to be on the bus, be home. Then I went to huddle and kind of told everybody, said, look at the person on your right, look at the person on your left. We're not playing for ourselves, we're playing for them. Do not let that person down. Do not let the person down the court beside you. If you're not winning, you stay out there to the very end. You will not be the 5th point for Kutztown. And ended up winning the match 5-3. So we went out and won 5-6 singles, as far as that goes. So, it was a big turnaround, but we looked like we were out of it after doubles. So, I was talking to Suresh Ramarutha, who was the coach at Kutztown. I was just talking to him a couple weeks ago. I brought up, I said, listen, I know that match is a sore point for you, but I got to tell you, man, that was that was the best team match I was ever involved in and everything. I said, we totally went in expecting we could beat you. Then it looked like you had just beaten us to a pulp. And then all of a sudden, things turned. And we just kept getting better and better as the match went on and stuff. So pretty exciting stuff at that time anyway.
Yeah, he's the current head coach, Lindsey Wilson, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Was he in his first year this past year or second year maybe?
No, first year.
Yeah, first year.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
He did out college coaching for, I want to say 3 or 4 years.
He had been at Kutztown for a long time, though, right? And had
Yes.
a lot of success there. I think
Oh,
quite
really?
a bit of PSAC championships and maybe some national appearances.
Oh, he was in nationals pretty much most years with his men's team and his women's. He had several good women's teams in the mid 2000s too. You know, he was very, very tough after he took over there, and that was a league controlled by Bloomsburg up to that point.
So when you talk about, you've turned the tide at Edinboro, you started to see some success. You won some championships there. Perennially a top. You were in the. I think, did you make regionals your last however many seasons at Edinboro, right?
Yes, last 3 years.
Yeah, and you won how many PSAC championships?
We won 3. We were runner-up in 2013, and the last year we were runners-up. We were regular season champions in 2017, but was runner-up at the tournament.
So what enticed you into your latest venture here at Barton College? What kind of sold you on that program, and why'd you want to take it over?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be blatantly honest. I looked at in 2015. I guess I probably should say this. That was the best team I ever had at Edinboro, but we didn't make. Well, I mean, we made the regionals, but we didn't make the nationals. We lost to Bluefield in the region finals. But that was the best Edinboro team I had. But we had several 5-4 losses that are just I'll never be able to explain. And we ended up getting ourselves in a situation where we're the fourth team, ranked when we were probably the second best team in the region. But it is what it is. We didn't win some matches, some really weird matches where we blew huge leads, and at the end of the day, we walked away with 5-4 loss. But we were really talented in doubles and singles with that team, and that was Vitor Albanese, which as far as I can tell you, from the time I was in the Atlantic region, that's the best player that's played in the Atlantic region since I've been since I was in the Atlantic region. I mean, he was a stud. But anyway, I at that fall or the beginning that fall, I went for an interview at Barton. Is what I'm trying to get to. Is how I got Barton, and I went down there, and they flew me down, and Edinboro was aware that I was looking, or that I'd been contacted and stuff. So I never got an offer from Barton. I have to be honest about that. They didn't offer me anything. They were interviewing a couple people, but before I got back on the plane, I had a call from my athletic director at Edinboro, Bruce Baumgartner, the Olympic wrestling champion, and they offered me a raise, stay, and pull out. So it was a considerable raise. So I stayed. And I knew the 2016 team was pretty special. We'd already been practicing a couple of weeks, but the intensity and energy, it wasn't as good as my 2015 team, but it seemed like it had everything that the 2015 team, if they would have had, would have whipped everybody with. I mean, we had energy and enthusiasm, and they played above themselves almost every day. I mean, I was constantly it was probably the easiest group I ever coached. So I stayed there and obviously finished. And, I was there in 2017, and I was at camp, and I saw D2 ticker that the coach at Barton left. Well, they won a conference championship, and they finished the year, I think, ranked 40th. Nation. And so he had turned some things around there, because Barton at one time was a perennial top 25 team. I mean, they've got 2 national titles under their belt when they were in the NAIA. So, I mean, formerly called Atlantic Christian, by the way, before they were Barton from the mid 90s on. But anyway, so I was open. So I just I got in touch with the athletic director at there. Obviously, he already he knew me and everything. So I was talking to him, and I just said, listen, I don't want to go through any long interview process and have to put him around. I said, if you're interested in me, you let me know. But I'm not coming down there to visit again. I've already visited and stuff. So he called me, and I did this via email. He called me when I was on my day off from camp. I was actually driving back to camp over in eastern part of Poconos, and he called me, and I was going through New York, so I had to pull over rest area. I called him back, and he basically offered me the job on the spot. And and of course, I'm not real quick with making decisions. So he gave me 48 hours, maybe it was 48 or 72 hours to make a decision. And, I talked to my wife and some things, and we were interested in getting out of the snow as far as that goes. And I was really interested in getting in. Southeast region is one of the best regions in the country. I was more interested in getting into a more competitive league and region. And our league and region, our league is very close in ability levels, and our region is some of the best in the country. So that was the reasoning behind that. But that's why I moved.
So you've kind of had 4 different schools with, wildly different scenarios, different scholarship situations, and varying levels of success. But for the most part, you've had a pretty good amount of success at every venture you've had. What's some advice you would have for a younger coach who's looking to get some skin in the game, and maybe some things that you had to learn the hard way as far as making jumps to new schools?
Well, I think it's easier now as far as that goes. It used to be you had to be local because the jobs were part-time.
Yeah.
So nobody was going to move 3 states away to take a part-time job. There was a little bit of that if the area was rich in tennis.
Because you can teach on the
make
side.
enough money teaching, but that's primarily more or less nowadays for assistant coaches. They might not make that much money from their assistant coach job, but they can get the camp job, they can get the lessons and everything and stuff like that. So, the thing is, you got to go in and prepared to know that you're not going to get rich ever. You're never going to get rich. But 2, you got to go into it thinking like, man, I got to work a lot, and I probably ain't going to have anything left over at the end of the month if you work a lot. So you got to be able to accept that. If you think you're going to go in on top, this is not the profession for you. Stuff, but there's a lot more opportunities now. There was a time during my career, my first 13 years, I never had an assistant coach or anybody paid. Okay, we had some volunteers, but we didn't have anybody paid. And you know what I started out with? And I got to tell you the story. I'm going to back up to 1994.
That's fine.
But that was the first year I won a Coach of the Year award. So at the time, I really thought that was big stuff.
Yeah.
And and for D&E it was. I'm like, man. My mom called me. She said, "You're going to get a raise." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm already talking to AD about it." I said, "I think I'm going to get a substantial raise. I'm thinking I'm going to make $1,000 each team. They're going to double my salary." And I tell you what, you talk about a company, man, Will Shaw. I love that guy to this day. But I bring it up every time I talk to him. I said, but he brought me in that room, sat me down, said, "We're going to give you a big percentage raise." Alec, guess how much I got per team for getting that?
You started out at 500 per team.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, judging by your facial expression, maybe $100 more per team.
That's exactly what I got. So and he said, "Man, that's a big percentage raise."
20%.
Yeah. So I left out of there. I was crushed. And then the next year, or that fall, or the following year, 95, I got it in women's tennis. Okay, the fall of 95. They didn't give me a raise. But slowly, along the way, the pay got a little better. I could say that. But you gotta take. I mean, for me, I guess I was crazy. I just wanted to coach, and I would do anything to do it. I had to supplement my income a lot. Substitute teaching was one, and then I was, I told you I taught full time for 13 years in the public school system, up until I went to Edinburgh, and then I was just full time in tennis. But we ran the Elkins Summer Tennis Program. And I did that for 16 years. Dave Simmons started it. I kind of took over for that. I guess it kind of became the D&E thing for a while, but we ran that up to, I started going to do camps up in Maine, and I think around 06, something like that, because I did camps up in Maine up until I went to Edinburgh. And then I did a few local things up in Edinburgh during the summer, but the pay was a lot more. I wasn't forced to do as much, otherwise. But and then I got the camp job I do to this day that's over in the Poconos right now. I've been doing, if we have it this summer, it'll be my 6th year and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, you got to be prepared to supplement. The money's not going to be even coming in, but you got to really want to do it. The other thing is you got to really want to get in on all angles, because if you want to be a head coach, you got to know how to recruit. So it's not just coming to the courts and being at practice. You got to go to the weight training with the kids. We do that every day at 7 a.m. Or 3 days a week at 7 a.m. with that. Then that's followed by usually 2 practices in the afternoon. So it's a lot of time spent. And then you got to do the office work. You got to do the credit card expense sheet. You got to make the recruit calls, the emails, the social media stuff. There's a lot of work involved. And if you think about the work involved, we're not getting paid much, but I would just say that you got to really want to do this. You got to have a drive for that. You want to much more than just being an armchair coach. Sitting there and say, hey, I think I could do that. But I've been lucky. A number of my former players have been head coaches. It started with David Brown, a Canadian who was assistant coach had a grad assistant at St. Lawrence and another school up in New York. But then he went to Belmont Abbey to be the head coach. That was late or early 2000s. He was the head coach here. I think he was there 2 years. And then Otis took over at D&E when they brought the program back. They hired him, and of course, he's now down in Florida now, coaching at Weber University, or International, excuse me. And Kyle Halpin, who played for me at Wesleyan, he's gotten into it and stuff. So he was at Fairmont for a couple of years, and now he's your head coach there. Kind of been lucky, but I tell everybody, I try to be as humble and as I can. I said, somebody said, hey, you got, a few years back, we had this big thing. PTR actually, I think they did a little teeny story on it, but we had 3 Coach of the Years, and 2 of them were about, I won Coach of the Year, and I forget what year it was.
2016 or 17? You, Otis, and Kyle, right?
Yes. It was me, Otis, and Kyle, and we were all there. We posed for a picture at one of the little Fairmont tournament up there, and we brought our little plaques to show it. But we took a picture. But that was kind of neat. But I always tell everybody, I said, well, you've had a fair amount of people that ended up being coaches after you. I said, yeah. I said, after they played for me and saw me do it, they said anybody could do this daggone thing. So, I kind of inspired them, and not the sort of way most people think they get inspired and stuff. But and I forgot to mention Cody. My gosh, I don't even know how I forgot to mention Cody. Cody being the latest one up at Edinburgh.
And Vitor as his assistant.
Yeah, and he played for me at Edinburgh his 4 years, and he when I left, they ended up hiring him as the head coach. So I've been lucky. So having one, 2, 3, 4 guys that have spent some significant time as head coaches and stuff. So I feel blessed with that. But I think it was all after they saw me do it. They figured anybody could do this job. So.
Coach, you've definitely left your footprint in the Atlantic region, but definitely just in the NCAA tennis scene as a whole. Really appreciate you doing this today. I thought you gave some really good information and thought-provoking comments there at the end. Thanks for giving me your time today. I look forward to hopefully getting to play you next year. I know that didn't get to happen this last season, but hopefully me and Kyle get to battle with you next year. Any final remarks you have for us today, Coach?
No, just we're at a changing time in tennis overall. I mean, we're more into revenue expectations, those type of things. Things are tougher, totally different than when I first got in. I don't even think revenue was even thought of or even heard of back then. With that, it was never a conversation. It's all come lately. A lot of programs have been cut. I've seen so many come and go, and some come back again. I've just, it's what turned out like, at the beginning, I think it was a hobby. It's now a business. And, I think that, the young coaches should go into this, think that they're going in, running a business. And that's what they're going to be doing and everything, that they're the CEO of their team. And so they've got to treat it as such. I think that would be good, useful knowledge. But the landscape has changed tremendously overall, and we're going into a year this fall. Things could still change from this, but we got our maximum amount of matches lowered to 17. It's going to be tougher to play. A lot of different teams that we normally used to play stuff. Schedule's going to be more condensed as far as that goes. So, and I'm sure there's going to be changes after this that are probably going to stick around for a while.
Definitely some thought-provoking comments there. Good stuff, Coach. Appreciate you a lot, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. You take care, bud.
No problem, Lee. Have a great day, man.
You too. Bye.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right.